At 88, Helen had become a quiet legend in her small Pennsylvania town. Every Thanksgiving, she hosted a grand family dinner, and every year she gave her grandkids thoughtful gifts. But this year, something changed. One by one, each grandchild received an envelope with crisp $100 bills and a beautifully wrapped board game, the kind that brought back memories of snowy winters and family laughter, all ... except one. Michael sat at the far end of the table. No gift, no envelope. Just silence, and the quiet clink of silverware. He was the grandson Helen never spoke about. The one born from a chapter of her life she wished to forget when she was just 17. Why did she leave him out again? What followed was not a tantrum, ... not a scene, but something so unexpected it would echo through the entire family for years. Because that night, Michael stood up and did something no one saw coming. And what Helen revealed later that week behind closed doors changed everything. If you've ever wondered how deeply family wounds can cut, or how far forgiveness can go, ... you're in the right place before we continue. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, so whenever you're busy or need a reminder of what truly matters, you won't miss stories like this. Now, ... what really happened between Helen and the grandson she never claimed. Let's go back and find out. Her name was Helen, 88 years old, a retired school teacher from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She still wore her wedding ring even though her husband had been gone for 15 years. Every year she hosted Thanksgiving. Same house, same menu. Mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce from a can-be, 'cause that's how the grandkids liked it. And every year she prepared little surprises, games for the kids, jokes for the adults, stories for anyone who would listen. But this year, there was something different in her eyes. She moved slower, laughed quieter, and when she looked around the room, there was a pause just long enough for those who loved her to feel it in their chests. She stood beside a stack of beautifully wrapped board games. "Time for a little fun," she said, her voice shaky but warm. Each game had a name tag, and each tag was paired with a crisp white envelope. "Lisa," she called out. The teenage girl jumped from the couch. Inside her box was a limited edition of her favorite game plus $200 in cash. She squealed and hugged her grandma so hard that Helen lost her balance and almost fell into the mashed potatoes. The room erupted in laughter. "I'm okay," Helen chuckled, brushing off her apron. "You try being tackled by a soccer player?" Then came Kevin, Amy, Jonah, one by one. Each grandchild received their gift, smiles, hugs, laughter. But when the stack ran out, one boy still sat quietly at the edge of the room. Michael, the eldest of the grandchildren. Tall, thoughtful, but always slightly apart. Helen didn't call his name. She didn't look in his direction. She simply turned and folded her hands. In her lap that the room went still. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else reached for the gravy. Michael stood. No anger, no shame, just a long breath. And he walked toward her. The room held its breath. He stopped in front of her and said gently, "It's okay, Grandma. I didn't come for gifts." Helen didn't respond. She stared at the fireplace, her knuckles white on, her folded hands, and in that moment, it wasn't about board games anymore. It was about everything that hadn't been said. For decades, because Michael wasn't like the others, he was born when Helen was just 17, raised by relatives, hidden from the world, and even now, sitting under her roof, he still wasn't fully family. Not in her eyes. He turned to leave, but just before he reached the hallway, her voice broke the silence. "You look like your grandfather," she said, barely above a whisper. Michael froze. Everyone froze. Somewhere in the back, a wine glass clinked. Awkwardly, he turned slowly. "I wish I'd had the chance to know him," he replied. Helen's eyes didn't meet his. She simply nodded once, and that was it. No hug, no apology. Just silence. Lisa, trying to lighten the mood, shouted, "Grandma, you forgot the game for me and Michael to play together." She held up a giant box of sorry, with the cheesiest grin. The room cracked into soft laughter again. Even Helen smiled faintly. Michael gave Lisa a playful salute. Rematch after dessert. "You're on," she grinned. Sometimes it takes a joke to breathe again. But deep down the air still held weight. Michael walked outside for a moment. The wind was cold. He closed his eyes and remembered that one letter he sent Helen when he was 13. The one she never replied to. The one that started with, "Hi, Grandma. I think we've never met, but I'd like to." He never knew if she read it, or if she even wanted to. But right now, she had said one thing. "You look like your grandfather." And for some reason, that hurt more than silence. If you've ever carried a family silence like Michael did, or been on the edge of a conversation that never happened, consider subscribing. Stories like these might just find you at the right time, because sometimes the things we don't say echo the loudest. The air outside was colder than he remembered. Michael walked slowly down the porch steps. The crunch of gravel beneath his boots, louder than the voices he'd left behind. In his pocket, his fingers curled around something small, not a phone. Not keys, but a folded photograph. Edges worn, corners bent. He didn't need to open it. He knew every detail by heart. It was a picture of him and Helen. He must have been 5. She was kneeling beside him, arms wrapped tight, her smile brighter. Then the sun. It was the last time he remembered her holding him like that back inside the house. Helen stood frozen at the kitchen sink. She wasn't washing dishes, just staring out the frosted window, hands resting on the edge like she needed support. Lisa entered quietly. "Grandma," she said softly, "what happened with Michael?" Helen didn't answer at first. Instead, she took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and let the memory pull her backward. 25 years ago, Helen's daughter, Rachel Michael's mother, had just arrived at her doorstep, soaked from the rain, holding a baby wrapped in a thin hospital blanket. "No one else will take him," she'd whispered. "I can't do this, Mom. He's not your typical child." Helen remembered the weight of that child in her arms, light but heavier than the world. She'd rocked him, fed him, sang lullabies into the quiet of midnight hours. But the whispers had started almost immediately from church friends, from neighbors, even from her own husband at the time. "You're raising someone else's mistake. He's not blood. You'll never get your life back." And Helen, proud and strong and tired, had made a choice. She gave Rachel an envelope of cash and said, "You need to take responsibility." Rachel left, but Michael stayed. For a while, until one day, without warning, he was gone, placed in foster care, moved from home to home. No one told Helen, no one asked. Years passed when Michael returned as an adult. No one even recognized him, except Helen. She always recognized his eyes, but guilt makes people do strange things. It builds walls and calls them boundaries. It avoids the truth by pretending it forgot. Back in the kitchen, Helen finally spoke. "He's not just my grandson," she whispered. "He's Rachel's son, but not from her husband." Lisa blinked. "But that means," Helen nodded. "He was born from something Rachel never talked about. Something painful, but I saw him grow. I heard his first words. I was there when he lost his first tooth." Lisa looked down. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" Helen smiled sadly. "Because I was afraid you'd treat him differently, and maybe because I already had." Lisa placed a gentle hand on her grandmother's arm. "He didn't want money, Grandma. He just wanted to belong." Outside, Michael sat on the bench at the edge of the yard. The wind had picked up, carrying with it the scent of pine and distant chimney smoke. He finally unfolded the photograph on the back. In crayon-scrawled handwriting, it read, "Best day ever with Grandma. I hope we have forever." His thumb traced the words. He smiled, not bitterly, but with a quiet ache. Then, from behind him, a voice. "You still carry that?" Michael turned. It was Jonah. Younger cousin, kind eyes. Michael shrugged. "Only thing that stuck." Jonah sat beside him. "You know, no one really understood what happened. But I always remembered you. You let me stay up late that summer, taught me how to cheat at Go Fish." Michael chuckled softly. Terrible influence. Jonah smiled. "I think she wants to fix it, but she doesn't know how." Michael stood up. "Some things you can't fix. You can only own them." Jonah nodded slowly. "But sometimes owning them is the first step." Back in the house, Helen picked up the empty box she'd almost handed to Michael earlier. Inside, hidden beneath the tissue paper, was something she hadn't had the courage to give him. A card. And a key. The card read, "I can't rewrite the past, but maybe we can start a new chapter." And the key, it was to the cabin by the lake. The one Michael used to ask about every summer. The one that had stayed locked since he left. Helen placed it gently on the table. Then, with a trembling hand, she reached for her coat. The late afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting soft shadows on the living room walls. The party had ended. Laughter had faded into silence. Guests were gone, save for one. Michael sat alone by the window, the key Helen had left still resting in his palm. He didn't know if it was a gesture of peace or guilt or both. Then he heard it, the soft shuffle of slippers against the hardwood floor. He didn't turn around. Helen's voice was barely more than a whisper. "I was hoping you'd still be here." Michael let the silence stretch. Then finally, "I wasn't sure if I should be." She moved slowly, deliberately, and sat in the armchair across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was the first time in over 20 years they'd been alone together. Helen broke the silence. "I saw the way you looked at me when I handed you that empty box." Michael exhaled slowly. "I wasn't surprised. I just hoped I wouldn't be right." Her eyes welled. "I packed a gift for you. I even signed the card, but I couldn't bring myself to give it to you. I was afraid you'd throw it back at me." Michael looked at her now fully. "I never asked for much, Helen. Just a moment, a word, a reason. Helen swallowed hard. You want a reason? I'll give you one. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a letter, yellowed. With time, this was from the agency, after they took you. Michael froze. No one told me why. One day I was there. The next, I was gone. Helen's voice trembled. I didn't sign that paper, Michael. I fought it, but my husband at the time, he said it was you or him, and I was too weak to lose again. Michael's voice cracked, a quiet anger rising beneath his calm. So, you chose comfort over me. No, she said quickly, tears falling now. I chose fear. For a long moment, all that filled the room was the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Michael stood and walked toward the fireplace. He placed the key on the mantel gently, as if it were fragile. I used to dream you'd come find me, he said, voice quiet. Even when I was in those awful places, I told the other kids, my grandma's coming back for me. You'll see. He turned, eyes glossy. But you never did. Helen covered her mouth with her hand as if to hold back a sob. I thought. I'd lost the right. Michael stepped forward slowly. And what about now? Helen looked up at him. I don't know, but I want to earn it back, if you'll let me. Then came the moment neither expected. Michael reached into his coat and pulled out the photograph, the one from years ago. He held it out to her. I kept this, he said softly. Through everything, through every move, every home, every disappointment. This was the only thing that made me feel like I belonged somewhere. Helen took the picture with trembling hands. I remember that day, she whispered. You had chocolate all over your face. And I said you looked like a raccoon. Michael smiled faintly. I didn't even care. I was just happy. She looked up at him now, eyes clearer than they'd been in years. I can't undo what I did. But maybe we can try again. Start small. A cup of coffee. A walk by the lake. You could come visit the cabin. Michael hesitated, then nodded once. One step at a time. Helen smiled. It was the first real smile she'd shown him all day. Then, in the silence, Michael asked quietly, Do you ever think things could have been different? Helen stood slowly and walked to him. She placed a hand on his arm. I think about it every single day. The next morning, the town was still asleep, blanketed in soft fog. Helen stood by the stove, stirring oatmeal slowly, lost in thought. She had barely slept out across the kitchen table. Michael sipped coffee, eyeing a faded scrapbook Helen had left out photos, receipts, newspaper clippings. A whole life she never shared. Mind if I look? Michael asked. Helen hesitated, then nodded. He flipped through the pages. A younger Helen smiling next to a tall man in uniform. A baby's hospital bracelet, but then came a photo. He didn't recognize a teenage boy next to the same man. That's not me, he said slowly. Helen's hand froze midair. Her eyes flicked to the photo. No, that's Charles, she said, barely above a whisper. Michael raised an eyebrow. Who's Charles? Helen looked away. My son, your uncle, but I never told you about him. She sat down heavily, the weight of memory pulling her down. Charles was older than your mother. He was brilliant, charming, but troubled. Always needed control, even as a child. Michael leaned forward. What does this have to do with me? Helen's eyes met his. He hated that your mother had a baby young, said it would shame the family, said she was weak and that you'd ruin everything. A chill ran down Michael's spine. Helen continued, voice shaking. When your mother passed, I wanted to raise you, but Charles, he made it impossible. He used his connections, pulled strings. He told social services lies that I was unfit, that I had health problems, that I was too unstable. Michael's jaw clenched. He got rid of me. Helen nodded slowly. I fought, but no one listened. He made sure of that. Then he moved away, disappeared. I never saw him again. Michael stood, pacing the room now, anger building. I spent my childhood thinking you abandoned me. I know, Helen whispered. That's exactly what he wanted. Michael stopped, turning back to her. And you never told me this before because I was ashamed, I thought. If I told you, you'd think I was making excuses, that it wouldn't change anything. He sat back down, rubbing his temples. This Charlesy ruined everything. Helen nodded. But he's not the only one who kept secrets. Michael looked up confused. There's more. Helen hesitated. I got a letter, years ago, from your last foster home. They wanted to adopt you, said you were thriving, that you were the light of their lives. Michael's breath caught. I never knew that. They told me the adoption fell through. Helen pulled open a drawer and handed him the worn envelope. They said you chose not to stay, that you ran away. Michael opened the letter. Read the shaky handwriting, the loving tone. No, he said firmly. I never got this. Never saw this letter. A heavy silence fell. Another twist. Helen's voice dropped. I think someone intercepted it. Maybe Charles, or maybe the agency. I don't know, but that chance of you having a real home was stolen too. Michael felt a wave of emotion rise in him. Grief, rage, and something else, an ache for what could have been. I don't know what hurts more, he whispered. What I lived through or what I missed out on. Helen reached across the table, resting her hand lightly over his. You didn't deserve any of it. But you're here now. We both are. Then came a soft knock on the door. They looked at each other, startled. Helen opened it, cautiously, and gasped. A man, tall and older, but unmistakable Charles. I heard you had company, he said smoothly, stepping inside without invitation. Michael stiffened. You. Charles smiled, cool and confident. So, the lost grandson returns. How quaint. Helen's voice shook. What are you doing here, Charles? He shrugged. I came to see what the fuss was about, and to remind you, sister, that not all stories have happy endings. Michael stood tall. They do, when people stop letting bullies write them. The door slammed behind Charles as he walked out, leaving a silence so heavy it pressed on Michael's chest. Helen slowly sat down, her eyes moist. I'm sorry you had to meet him like that. Michael didn't answer right away. His mind was a whirlwind of images, fragments, and emotions. Years of pain suddenly had a face, a name, a cause. He walked to the window, staring into the fog, letting the cold glass cool his forehead. I spent so long thinking I was the problem, he said, quietly. That I wasn't lovable, that no one wanted me. Helen stood beside him. You were never the problem, Michael. You were the victim of someone else's fear, his control, not your fault. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He lay in the small guest bed, staring at the ceiling, memories swirling like smoke. Foster homes, quiet rejections, cold birthdays. But now he saw them differently. They weren't rejections. They were manipulations, and maybe, just maybe, he wasn't broken. He had been kept from healing. The next morning, he made breakfast, quietly, calmly, thoughtfully. Helen shuffled in, surprised to find him at the stove. You're cooking? She asked with a soft smile. Michael shrugged. I figured. You've made enough oatmeal for a lifetime? They shared a laugh, a soft, healing sound. After breakfast, Michael pulled out a notebook. I've been thinking, he began. Helen raised her eyebrows. I want to stay. A while, at least. There's so much I never knew about you, about my mom, about me. Helen's hands trembled, but she nodded. I'd like that very much. He flipped the notebook open. Also, I want to start making things right. He began small. He visited his old neighborhood not to judge or resent it, but to understand it. He found the woman who ran the shelter he once stayed at. She remembered him. You were a quiet one, she said, always looking out for the younger kids. That surprised him. He had always thought of himself as invisible. Then he found a job. Nothing big, just washing dishes at the local diner. But it was the first time he chose something for himself. Each night, he came home with aching feet, but a calm heart. Helen would be waiting on the porch, a blanket draped over her knees. How was it today? And he'd answer. And she'd listen. They were, finally, building something. One evening, while clearing boxes in the attic, Michael found an old guitar, dusty but intact. You played? He asked Helen. Your mother did, she replied, eyes misty. She used to sing to you. When you were just a baby, he strummed a few chords, clumsy but heartfelt that night. By the fire, he played for her, a simple tune. No words. Helen closed her eyes. The past floated gently around them. Not painful, not haunting, just there. But not everything healed so easily. One afternoon, Helen received a letter. Charles again. This time, a legal notice. He was trying to claim the family land. The house. Michael's first instinct was rage. He's not getting this place. But Helen was calm. I won't let him either. But we'll fight with truth, not bitterness. For the first time, Michael realized how strong she was. Not loud, strong, not cruel, strong, but quiet, steadfast strong. At church, people began noticing him. You're Helen's grandson. You're the one helping around the food pantry. He had never imagined he'd be known for good things. One day, a child at the pantry tugged his sleeve. Are you someone's grandpa? He laughed. Not yet, buddy. But something in his heart shifted for the first time. The idea of having a future, a real, good future, didn't feel like a fantasy. Late one night, he sat with Helen on the porch. The sky clear, stars bold. I used to think I'd never belong anywhere, he said. Helen looked at him, smiling. But now, he took a deep breath. Now I think maybe belonging isn't a place. Maybe it's a person or people or just knowing the truth. Finally, Helen reached over, holding his hand. You've always belonged, Michael. It just took a while to find your way back. It was a quiet winter morning. Frost had crept up the windows, and the wind howled through the old wooden walls. Helen called Michael upstairs. "Help me move this chest, darling. It's been creaking all night, like it's got something left to say." Michael chuckled gently and stepped closer, not knowing that opening that chest would unravel a truth buried for nearly 30 years. As they sorted through faded books and dusty linens, Michael's hand brushed against something wedged beneath a stack of yellowed papers. It was an envelope worn, faded, and sealed shut. The handwriting on it read, "To my son, if you're ever allowed to read this." His heart skipped. Helen glanced over and her smile faded. "That's your mother's handwriting," she whispered. Michael opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a letter, the ink smeared but legible. And as he read, the words echoed in the stillness of the attic. "They told me I wasn't good enough, that I was too young, too poor, too lost. They forced my hand. They said you'd be better off without me. But not a single day past that I didn't ache for you. You were never a mistake. You were the most beautiful part of me." Michael's eyes welled with tears. So all this time, it wasn't abandonment. It was theft. Helen sank to the floor. "I didn't know. Charles must have taken that letter. I swear on everything I didn't know." Michael said nothing, but the tears falling down his cheeks weren't angry. They were full of something worse. Quiet heartbreak. The very next morning, Helen collapsed in the kitchen. Michael rushed her to the hospital, hands shaking. After a long series of tests, a doctor called him into the hallway. "I'm afraid your grandmother has early onset Alzheimer's. It's still manageable, but the window is shrinking. Eventually she won't recognize you." The world fell out from under him. So much lost time had just been uncovered only to be threatened again by time itself. That evening, Helen acted as if nothing had happened. She told stories about Michael's mother, how she used to sneak extra cookies, how she once played guitar barefoot in the rain. But behind her smile was resignation. "I know I won't have long," she said softly, "but I hope, maybe, one day you'll forgive me." Michael reached out and held her wrinkled hand. "I already have, and I'm not going anywhere." A week later, a call came from an estate lawyer. "There's an old land transfer tied to your grandmother's property. It was never finalized. You can either pay a sizable transfer fee or give up the house." Michael stared at the number. It was everything he had saved. All of it. If he paid, he could keep the house. The only thing his mother ever left behind. The place where Helen now found peace. The place they had begun to stitch their broken hearts together. Helen simply said, "It's just a house. You don't need to waste your future on it." But Michael didn't see it that way. He saw the porch where his mother once played as a child. The kitchen where Helen had just told him stories he'd never heard. The attic that held a mother's lost words. "No," he said. "This house holds our story, and I'm not letting it go." He walked into the bank the next day trembling and signed every paper. He gave up every cent he had for a roof, for a memory, for a second chance, for love. That night he brought Helen out to the front porch. The stars blinked above like they hadn't in years. "The house is ours," he said simply. Helen smiled faintly, her eyes a little glassier than usual. "I may forget, sweetheart," she said, "but something deep inside will remember." Michael squeezed her hand gently. "Then I'll remind you. Every day." It was a quiet Sunday morning when Michael stood at the hospital hallway window watching the rain blur the city skyline. Inside the room, Helen lay resting, her breathing slow, her hands still warm, but frail. The nurse had said the words, "No one is ever ready to hear. She may not have much time left." Michael sat beside her bed, gently holding her hand. The same hand that had once pushed him away was now reaching for comfort. He looked at her, eyes filled with sorrow but no longer anger. He had come so far. They had come so far. He leaned in, whispered softly, "I'm here, Grandma. I never left." Helen opened her eyes slowly. With a tired smile, she whispered back, "I know, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." As the afternoon light filtered in through the blinds, Helen gathered enough strength to ask for something surprising. "Michael, can you call Anna?" Michael hesitated. Anna, the cousin who had lied, manipulated, and nearly destroyed everything? The one who had stolen not just money, but trust? "Please," Helen said, her voice trembling. "She needs to know I'm sorry, too." An hour later, Anna arrived, unsure, nervous. She walked into the room like a stranger, but the look on Helen's face told her she was still. Family, they didn't say much, but when Helen took her hand, something shifted. A long silence passed. Then Anna choked out, "I never hated you. I just wanted to be seen." Helen simply nodded. "I see you now." Later that evening, after Anna left and Helen had fallen asleep again, Michael found a sealed envelope in Helen's purse. On the front it said, "To be opened after I'm gone." He didn't open it yet, not because he was afraid, but because some moments are meant to wait. Helen passed away 2 days later, peacefully, quietly in her sleep. The house felt different now, still, sacred. After the funeral, Michael sat alone at the kitchen table and finally opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a deed. Michael, I never earned your forgiveness, but you gave it to me anyway. This home, my home, is now yours. May you fill it with love, second chances, and stories worth telling. Forgive yourself too. You were never the problem. You were the gift I almost lost forever. Attached was the official deed, transferring full ownership of the house to Michael debt-free a few weeks later. Michael stood on the front porch, looking out at the neighborhood. The flowers Helen loved had begun to bloom again. Children rode bikes and neighbor waved. Life moved forward, but Helen's presence still lingered in the garden, in the creak of the stairs, in the scent of the old armchair she refused to throw away. Michael smiled. He didn't just gain a house, he gained clarity, healing, peace. Michael turned the house into a haven for teens who aged out of foster care, kids like he had once been. He called it Helen's Hearth. The first girl to move in was named Grace. She was 17, quiet, angry at the world, just like he had been one night. She found the letter Helen wrote. She read it, and for the first time she cried, not because she was sad, but because she felt seen. Some stories don't end when a character dies, they echo in the hearts they've touched. Helen wasn't perfect. She made terrible choices, but in the end, she made the most powerful one of all, to try again, to say sorry, to leave behind something better than what she took. And sometimes, that's more than enough. Sometimes the most powerful journeys aren't the ones that take us around the world, but the ones that lead us back to the people we thought we lost forever. Helen's story wasn't perfect. It was messy, painful, and filled with regret. But it was also human and deeply real, because who among us hasn't made a mistake we wish we could take back? Who hasn't longed for a second chance or feared we'd missed our moment? And yet, even at the very end, she showed us something beautiful. It's never too late to change the ending. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to forgive someone you thought you never could? Or maybe you were the one who needed grace? Leave a comment. Your story might help someone else heal. And if this video moved you, if you'd like more stories that speak to the heart, click subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next one. Sometimes all it takes is one story to shift how we see everything. And if you have time, stay with us a little longer. There's another story waiting for you just after this one. One that may surprise you even more. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care of each other and take care of your story.